blows my mind. Over the course of the last few years, especially, but I understand that it's been a sort of narrative that's festered for some time, but just gained momentum in recent years, that I've noticed anyway, is that the idea, the concept of nationalism is selfish. We should be more focused on prioritising everybody from a climate and all this shit, hence the global citizenship push, the never-ending push to interdependence, etc. Fundamentally, I couldn't give a fuck about Africa and its overpopulation issues. I couldn't care about any other part of the world, right, that is having issues with its demographics. And that should be the same for the people that write these reports. That should be the same for the government. They should be focused on the issues in Scotland. But they don't give a fuck. Or they certainly don't care about the ramifications of the things that they suggest. I think it's more selfish to pretend that you care about the world as opposed to your own people in your own country. If projections showcase that our demographics are on the decline, and it does get stated somewhere, I can't recall off the top of my head where, but it does get stated at some point that it's due to, not enough, all your births, obviously, and then outward migration as well. So there's a few things that they mentioned, but nonetheless, it's like, if that's what the projections show, in an ideal world anyway, you'd be putting an investigation together, a task force to try and reverse these trends, find out why these trends exist, what's causing them, how can we put a stop to it, what can we do anything to help? And then you should be focusing on a future, if this can't be prevented, where you shape the economy around a shrinking population, as opposed to continuing on with what you're fucking doing because you can just go, we'll just let the kings in. Because they're quite prepared, they say it in this report, they're quite prepared to start thinking about a future where we have an ageing population, there's a lot more elderly people. They're quite prepared to shape society somehow to accommodate them, but yet they can't think outside the box and potentially think of ways to accommodate a smaller population. We need to keep the floodgates open. It's very remarkable to me how they can pick and choose. Because fundamentally, immigration has been and will always be a fundamental policy for the SNP and all who sing from that hymn sheet. And it's a hymn sheet they all sing from indeed. Because I have never, to this date, seen any report that's ever come out from anybody, irrespective of whether or not they're independent from government or if they're the government themselves, never a fucking mention of anything to at least talk about the issues that are causing our decline. No, they never address it. Instead, it's, we need immigration powers. If only we had independence, we could just have our own devolved immigration powers. But in the meantime, we'll just pander to asylum seekers because that is our version of immigration. Yes. Wow. So anyway, I had to say that, about the nationalism, that really irritates me. I think that's more fundamentally selfish, where you're more concerned about what the fuck happens on the other side of the world than you are about your own. But it says here that major studies called for tax powers to be devolved to Scotland's biggest cities, and they mean obviously Aberdeen, Glasgow and Edinburgh. By the way, the council thing in Edinburgh at present, does that mean now that since the SNP have been shafted that there won't be any anti-racist education coming to the Edinburgh kids for a while? Good, if that's the case, but I'll believe it when I fucking see it. Nonetheless, it's still good to watch the SNP cry. It's not nice when the shoe's on the other foot, yeah. So it says that a major academic study of these aforementioned cities has found that the COVID-19 pandemic, climate crisis and Brexit have combined, just conveniently combined, These convenient crises have all come out of nowhere, as luck would have it, and they've all conveniently combined. Right? First of all, we had the likes of Thin Lips making a reference to that very fact about COVID itself, back in the day in the Parliament, saying that, of course you wouldn't wish this on anybody, but it's undoubtedly the case that it's brought about the possibility for us to, push for change, an opportunity that wasn't afforded to us previously. Then the same fucking thing happened with this cost of living crisis, COVID was the excuse to start implementing the Sustainable Development Transformation Change, the decade of action that was that was announced at the beginning of the year, right? That was the start of it. That was the excuse to ensure that the oil and gas sectors were squeezed a little bit more so we could turn the taps off, etc. And then we have to now use the current crisis, so this is crisis what, number 2? I wonder how many more there will be in the upcoming years as we progress through the decades, you know. But this crisis now ensures that we now start to have our behaviour change because we're having to veer away from the very same energy sources that we would ordinarily have to come off or be forced, coerced, whatever you will, to move away from if we all just accepted the green narrative, irrespective of whether or not there was a crisis at play here. That's very fucking convenient. Very convenient. You know, and there are even signs, they're even going so far as to say, and it just luck would have it, you know. Petrol etc. is through the roof, but, oh, wow, green energy is quite low now, you know. Just nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Oh, what a shock. How convenient. You know, you got the likes of the BBC for green activists. That's what we're all becoming, unintentionally, unbeknownst to us, because these are the sort of things that we would have to be doing anyway. Oh, that's very convenient, is it not? You know? Just a convenient crisis straight after the previous convenient crisis. And we had experts, so-called experts, in the Parliament at one of the committees in Scotland talking about telling us all the things that we could start to consider to help, ease a squeeze type shit, to mitigate the issues of this current crisis. But as luck would have it, by the way, all those things that he's telling you to do, he reminds you in said committee that, this will be handy for the future as we move away from the fossil fuels. Oh, fucking hell. It's just remarkable how many of these convenient coincidences just seem to be emerging here. You know, God really is looking down on us favourably, is he not? You know, giving us all of these opportunities that were never afforded to us previously. You know, at the start of the year, the UN were kicking up dust, unsure of how the fuck we were going to achieve the 2030 targets. Well, we're well on our way to achieving them now, are we not? Yeah, things accelerating at a great pace. All thanks to all the crises. Yeah, and they actually expect us to believe that nonsense. That's the worst part about it, as far as I'm concerned. It's an absolute insult to the intelligence. And outline, what has changed and what's not in light of the pandemic and accelerating, by design, accelerate the transformation of society. Now all we keep hearing about is accelerate. That's very convenient. Very convenient. Wording is just chef's kiss. Professor Brian Evans, head of urbanism at the Glasgow School of Arts, and an advisor to the United Nations. Well, there's no smoke without fire, is there not? There's always going to be one of them lurking about. He probably overseen this report to ensure that it was written correctly. Because at the end of the day, who's this report for? Fundamentally, I would assume that they expect the SNP to sit down and read this, word for word, page for page, all 162 odd pages of it. And then have a wee discussion amongst themselves and go, yeah, that's what needs to happen, But as I said, it's the same fucking hymn sheets at the end of the day, and it's an identical hymn sheet to anybody else at the UN as well as the SNP. But just remarkable that one of them happens to be part of this report. He led the research team and estimates that city inhabitants will soon outnumber rural dwellers, and for the first time in human history. Which is a good thing in many respects, because ideally, in the future, they'd like nobody to be out there in the countryside. Want everybody in their sustainable cities. So that could be a good thing going forward. We'll have to that remains to be seen. But so I'll just put that one out there. But by 2030, a fifth of our population will be of retirement age. By 2050, the figure will surpass a quarter. This presents significant challenge around how our citizens interact with their cities, but also around the human capital required for them to function. This poses particular problems for Scotland as immigration is currently a reserved matter. Right, okay, so, and until such a time as it's not a reserved matter, what could be done in the meantime? Well, I'll tell you one of the things that I would suggest, right, and this is going to have to do with actually incentivizing births. Why don't we look to the diaspora of Scotland, and we should start putting the feelers out to see how many of them we could entice back here. That's a simple, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a favourable policy that I could get behind. And then second of all, we can start going back to what I was referring to for the best part of this video, and we should start to look at the many ways that people in Scotland are being socially engineered for one, right? I would argue, I would make a great argument, in fact, that the destruction of the family units played a pivotal role, and the fact that feminism is rife in Scotland, from the court system all the way down to our little nursery children. Everything's about fucking feminism and empowering women and girls. There's no desire anymore for people to form relationships that used to be the bedrock of our society. I'm not advocating for us to go back to the days of old before old was old type thing, right? where women are forced in the kitchen and they cannot speak unless spoken to type of thing. What I am suggesting is we should be doing things. We should be doing everything in our fucking power to try and reverse the trends that are on display. But instead of that, they feign ignorance. They all do this, whether it's Thin Lips, whether it's any of the other S&P dickheads, or whether it's this report, or whether it's any other report. Even in the UK context, there was another article that I had up earlier on, which was talking about the latest projections. This was from January time, showcased that the UK's overall population is expected to shrink or stall even and start to decline before the end of the decade. Don't think they took into account all the million that came in last year apparently though, right? Scotland's not the only one with the birth rate issues. England and Wales both have the same problem. And where's the concern down there really? No, there's none. Of course there's none, because they've got Rishi Sunak, etc. and plenty more of Rishi Sunaks that they can just invite in, as well as the Singapore people. China, well, it doesn't really fucking matter where they're from, does it? Because at the end of the day, it's GDP, it's growth, it's somebody to have children on your behalf, because Whitey isn't having children, you know. It's just wonderful. And I know you'll hear the arguments all the time, like, yeah, well, immigrants that come here, after a couple of generations, they become just like us, and then they stop having kids too, etc., etc. I don't give a fuck. I don't care if that is the case at all. Because at the end of the day, if things continue as they are, the damage will become irreversible. I would argue that it's possible that that might be the case already. Radical change needs to occur. And when I say radical change, I'm not referring to us investing all of our fucking wealth into wind turbines and a green economy and letting Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater dictate what can and cannot be said and done in our nation. Now I'm talking about radical policies to save our people. I would have thought that people take precedence over some fucking utopia, but no, of course not. It's all about sustainability, because remember folks, it's selfish to think about your own nation and your own people. Instead we should be looking at the global picture, because more climate, yeah, such a larp. And you gotta think about it, why that has become so vocal. It's pivotal in all discussion now. You can't escape it. The climate, more climate, the planet, we're all in this together, we're all one. Solidarity, you know. Tropes, deliberate. So here's it here in all its glory. In fact, it's 168 pages long, give or take, you know, the old blank page at the bottom and the glossary, if it's got one, who knows. I never actually got to the bottom. It's just I noticed obviously that there was going to be information or suggestions, whatever, waffle even, about declining birth rates, etc. And then I read the whole spiel at the start about sustainable development. So you got the kid and you're like, shock. I should have expected that anyway when it was announced in the previous article that one of the people involved with the report itself, the so-called academics, part of the UN, shouldn't have expected it to be any different. It doesn't take long, as I said. Shocks to the system. Totally organic shocks to the system, mind. None of this is manufactured, but it just so happens that these shocks to the systems have provided opportunities, as I said, to lead to that sustainable change, the same sustainable change that was in the pipeline prior to the shocks to the system. So it is remarkable how things tend to work out sometimes. You get your forwards, then you'll get how is the century of the city shaping up, and they refer to demographics, fertility, etc., all the way down to the climate emergency, and then in summary, acceleration and a shift in emphasis. Well, that sounds relatively familiar to many of the things I've covered over the month, does it not? You know, behavioural change, etc. But we'll see, I guess. But anyway, right there, straight at the fucking bot, first one you see. Yeah, there's it there. Station. Wow. Anyhow, the bot goes on to talk about the 21st century and how it's apparently being a global consensus. It's one I wasn't aware of, but nice to know. Global consensus that the 21st century is the century of the city. You know, I would also make the case that the 21st century, Agenda 21, this is exactly what's happening, despite how they've managed to just call it Agenda 2030 now. Be under no illusion that when 2030 comes and goes, it'll be replaced by a 2040 or a 2045 or something of that nature. But fundamentally, this is a century-long plan. It's not going to happen overnight, and it sure as fuck isn't all going to be done and dusted by 2030. But there is equally no change in the view that although the world is still expected to reach peak population by mid-century, a consequence of changing demographics as countries industrialise, the significant pressure, how are they meant to industrialise when that's being prohibited, because industrialisation is effectively leading to climate change, yeah. Oh, you mean the grain industrial? Oh, right, yeah, oh, yeah, totally. The significant pressures on the carrying capacity of many regions in terms of climate, I see, perfect excuse to start shifting people on a global scale. An environment will only increase in some temperate regions. In migration will offset internal demographic trends characterised by ageing populations and falling birth rates. And what's been done to address these issues? Fuck all. It's what's been done as a result of these issues as opposed to what's been done to stop them. And then here we go. It is clear. It's clear, apparently. Oh, dearie me. It is clear, however, that the world, or at least the policy world, changed in 2015 with the publication by the UN of Transforming Our World, and with it the introduction of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and targets by which they would be measured. Perhaps for the first time there was a global agenda, language and taxonomy about how humankind should interact with the planet. At the time of SUAI, people were vaguely aware of the SDGs. Explicitly or implicitly, these principles underpin the basis of most urban policy. This is particularly true and prominent in countries and cities that have stated their intent to be net zero, carbon-wise, by 2030, if not before. Today, the policy of most governments and the practice of most cities is underpinned by the SDGs. Yeah. More and more, they're creeping up everywhere now. There's no escaping it. This is firmly the road that we have been placed upon, against our will, quote unquote. This fucking evil, man. If people can't see this for what it is, I don't know what to tell them anymore. I really am running out of words that I haven't rehashed before. I'm not a fucking thesaurus. The goals have three remarkable characteristics. First being that their targets were adopted by 195 countries worldwide. Were they adopted by the people that make up these countries, or were they adopted by the officials and the elected bureaucrats and whatnot? Yes, to the latter, and fucking no to the former. Although it is now 6 years since they were introduced, they have grown in stature and prominence across the globe. Today, member states, subnational governments, local authorities, private sector use them in their daily work, and it's gone so fucking far at this point that they're even introduced to children. The SDGs are often expressed as a circle which recognises that they are integrated and indivisible. Each has its strength, but only through a balanced approach to all 17 can their intent be achieved. Integrated approach of paramount importance, common action and endeavour across a broad and universal policy agenda. Right? Waffle. Pledging their allegiance, though. Ensuring that every goal must be achieved in order for us to really achieve what we're after. That utopia that we keep promising everybody. Yes, just ensure every policy, every target, every demand even has been met. I love that at the bottom as well. It's all just simply about providing a common foundation and a language upon which to base the work of the UN with member states, and its foundation for everything that the UN does in respect of sustainable development in cities. Yeah, okay. Believe that, you believe anything. And then they've got their shock to the system. The diatribe continues, and we get something we're all relatively familiar with, I'm sure. The Sustainable Development Goals, as beautiful and colourful and pretty as they all are. Age 2022, shocks to the system, totally organic. Yeah. Right, and they say that, but in the middle circle it says, we live in a Scotland where our built and natural places supporting infrastructure, economy and societies are climate ready, adaptable and resilient to non-existent man-made climate change. But if they can pretend it exists, it then justifies the rest of the shit, because we have to be resilient to the problem that they pretend exists. That's fucking great. We also have to change absolutely every aspect of our society, including the way that we view the world, get from A to B, who we associate with, when we can. Micromanagement will have to be arrived to stop the carbon destroying the planets. That same fucking fundamental life form on Earth, known as carbon. But let's just pretend it's a boogeyman all of a sudden. It's fucking, even that in and of itself is borderline psychopathic. So just to clarify that the graph here, this is where they're saying that the global goals alongside the national performance framework and climate change adaptation outcomes. Right, so that's what this graph here is about. So you've got the sustainable development goals on the outside, then we've got the adaptation outcomes, or in the middle, and it's showcasing how they all work in tandem, and always have done since the implementation of the goals to begin with. And the National Performance Framework has existed for a few years prior to the implementation of said goals, but the fact that they all work in tandem with our National Performance Framework essentially been built on the back of and based on this concept, despite the Sustainable Development Regime wasn't even a fucking thing, allegedly. So that's strange as it not, it was all about the Millennium Development Goals back then, which were fucking minuscule and tedious in comparison to what we see now. And we've got here that the SDGs are interrelated and indivisible, with SDG 11 all being about cities and communities, sustainable of course, and it is for cities of particular relevance and importance with its associated rights. SDG 11 recognises that the access to adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic services is central to the delivery of action in pursuit of this goal, and places it alongside access to safe, affordable and accessible and sustainable transport systems, inclusive and sustainable urbanisation supported by participatory, integrated and sustainable planning and management, safeguarding cultural and natural heritage, and universal access to safe, inclusive, it's all about that fucking inclusion, man, and accessible green and public spaces, interconnected SDGs, and the concept of a resilient city, where resilience is the capacity of cities and human settlement to respond better and faster to shocks, irrespective of whether or not they're organic or not, because had these totally organic crises come to pass in the past few years, this wouldn't be a talking point really. They'd still be wondering of how they can really get this going. How can they get the ball rolling? Well, they've succeeded there, have they not all done? But as I said, it's just a gift from God at the end of the day. It also says that social and economic impacts or climate disasters through supporting positive economic, social and environmental links between urban, peri-urban and rural areas by strengthening national and regional development planning for cities and the regional hinterlands, and increasing the number of human settlement, adopting and implementing integrated policies and plans towards inclusion. I mean, okay, this is beautiful stuff at this point. Oh, it's pretty fucking sweet, man. It has to be stressed, dude. So we're getting now more into the topic of the actual decline in birth rates, which again, there's going to be no mention from what I've seen so far. There never fucking is. They just assume it can all be glossed over by talk of devolved immigration powers, but nothing is done, nothing is suggested, nothing is discussed, nothing is stressed, nothing about why this is happening. Like, really, what can be done to stop it, and should we be concerned? Nothing at all. It's fine. It's fine. We're currently in the middle of all embracing global citizenship, so why the fuck should we care? It says here the international trends being revisited. Demographics, aging, fertility and migration. The country of the West and Eastern Europe and North America are experiencing very low population growth compared to other regions in the world such as Africa and Asia. A rapidly aging population, with the combination being attributed to low fertility rates and increased life expectancy. Now, low fertility rates, how is this happening? Why is this happening? Is there anything we can do? Not addressed. Increased life expectancy obviously is most prominent in Europe, but is prevalent in almost all the countries of the developed north and will remain a majority challenge in the coming decades. Among the world's countries that are shrinking or are projected to lose substantial parts of the populace in the coming 20 years or so, almost all are situated in the UNECE region, which is obviously the north, as mentioned at the start. The countries such as Europe, Britain, I wouldn't go so far as to maybe incorporate the other members of that said Anglosphere, such as New Zealand, etc. That might be to the piss a bit, but definitely the northern countries. Hence this global south, global north nonsense. Population aging is usually defined as a shift in the composition of the population towards the older generations, and as a consequence of decreases in fertility and increases in life expectancy. Aging is normally measured by the proportion of the population aged 60 or 65 and older. The last 2 decades, the age of population in the countries of the north has grown relatively slower, although is expected to grow faster in the coming decades to reach approximately 20% by 2030, 26 by 2050. That was described and illustrated in SUA by reference to UN data. Ageing has direct impact on cities as it changes the demands made in the infrastructure and social services, simultaneously leads to shrinking tax revenues, etc. In turn, demographic ageing is paralleled by a relative decrease in the active labour force, further lessening the tax take and putting pressure on housing accessibility and affordability. This poses the potential problems for all segments of the population, even though an increased need for social housing because older cohorts of the population remain longer in larger housing units. Increasing percentage of the elderly in the population creates a further challenge for public transportation in terms of adaptation and frequency. Diminished local revenue-based concessionary travel for older folks and lower densities caused by urban sprawl may put pressure on affordable public transportation for all segments of the populace. This is a clear and present challenge faced by Scotland and its principal cities, that being the fact that sorry, can I miss that sentence out, that the core aim of sustainability has been undermined by pressurised affordable public transportation. Ageing is more prominent in Europe than in most continents of the world, and we're just doing everything in our power to ensure that it stays that way. But this time around, the European people, as a result, will die off. Populations grow and shrink, fluctuations occur. This is not exactly a new phenomenon. What I would make the argument for, though, of course, is the phenomenon that we are seeing is the fact that this time around it does appear to be permanent, and it looks self-induced to many on the outside, but I think this is years, decades, generations of social engineering. Completely. Europe has experienced lower birth rates coupled with increasing life expectancy, both of which lead to older populations. Right? Both trends are here to stay. Oh, they're here to stay. Both trends are here to stay. And how do they know this to be the case? I assume we're going to find out in the next paragraph. What do you think? Oh, fuck you. That's what they think, apparently. Contemporary projections that are subject to change the closer you get to when the projection is supposed to present. So if a projection showcases what life will be like in 2025, by the time you get to 2024, half of what was on said projection looks like a load of bollocks. Anyhow, the projections have showcased that to be the case, so there's no point intervening, The computer said I, as opposed to no. Replacement rates are declining, i.e. birth rates will remain lower than death rates. Well, that's a given if there's a fucking influx of pensioners roaming about and not enough children to follow in their footsteps. But again, these are the sort of things that we should be looking at as a country, as a government, as a people, to try and resolve ourselves instead of accepting it as if this is the way it has to be because of projection and self-defeatism and nihilism, and your ideology has showcased you to just look the other way. I don't know what the fuck it is. I really don't understand why people look at this, hear what they say, and do not seem to instantaneously think just for us, or even a mere moment, about what this could mean 100 years from now. The end of us as a people, that's fucking what. I'm not saying that there won't be any of us left, but there sure as hell won't be enough to ever really sustain ourselves, to rejuvenate as a people. And hypothetically speaking, by the end of this decade, if all continues as it seems to be the case, what the fuck will society look like by that point anyway? Yeah. I don't know. Need to go off grid. That's what we all need to do. Ideally for me, it would be a case of, I'd love for nothing more than for, Scots in abundance, Brits in abundance even, to just finally wake up, smell the roses, realise that democracy's a scam, realise that all this shit's a scam, tell them to fuck off, the government. Democracy dies, that very moment, this mass awakening, I know it'll never happen, but if it did, the mass awakening, democracy fizzles into nothingness, all of a sudden that power that the likes of Boris Johnson, etc., think that they have over you, or you think that they have over you, it goes away. All of a sudden they're just like you and I, except they're paid more and wear shit suits and implement, or they don't even implement the policies really, they just, they rubber stamp them, they follow their instructions. All of a sudden it all comes crashing down. Then we just simply refuse point blank. and we just go off grid. You want to implement that shit, fuck off into Europe and go and do it. You want to implement that shit, go elsewhere. We'll get by ourselves. Impose all the sanctions you fucking want on us. We'll start living sustainably here. We'll do things ourselves. That's my ideal world. I don't know if it'll fucking happen, but that's what I'd love to see. So, but there's just just don't see any other feasible fucking way. Really, you have to just get out of the system. Because even if a country did go rogue, they're just going to get battered and bruised, and eventually a government will get in that will just kind of undo all the changes that the nasty, rebellious government had implemented prior. No, you just need to completely get out of it all. You can't be in any shape or form entangled with the likes of the tentacles of the United Nations, etc. This allows older people to stay in their homes. I've read this, right? But so what have we got? Communities with active lifestyles. So here we go. This allows older people to stay in their homes in communities with an active lifestyle, avoiding an institutional life for as long as possible. In addition to aging, there's general trends towards the individualization of lifestyle. That was never something that just happened out of nowhere, though, really, was it? That's something that's been forced upon us, as I hearkened to earlier, in reference to generational brainwashing, essentially. We were essentially being rewritten, recoded, if you will. Individualism. That was pushed as a concept to a certain extent, as far as I'm aware, to my knowledge anyway. Well before my time, obviously. We're talking at the end of World War II here, obviously. But, this notion was pushed way back then, generation after generation. Not just appear out of fucking nowhere. But, in combination with lower birth rates, which you could make the argument have come partly as a result of individualisation. Why the fuck would anybody want to marry one another? Well, marriages break down statistically anyway, but they're so obsessed with themselves and individualism, they have no time to think, to even conceive the possibility of settling down and having kids. I understand why so many people see that as something to frown upon, or something that they just don't seem interested in. I'd love for nothing fucking more for that to be my future. Well, fuck, knows if it was ever going to happen, huh? Black pill's too fucking crippling at this point anyway with this shit. The recent publication Shaping Aging Cities look at 10 European case studies. The study revealed the complexity of geographies and processes that cities experience in respect of aging populations, developing an understanding of the vulnerabilities and opportunities constructed around people in older age by both society and their physical environments. I don't know if I'm reading waffle here or not. Yeah. For example, the potential discriminatory effect of active travel on the wall in the car. This is a clear example of the nuance needed in the blanket pursuit of otherwise widely accepted policies, and an instance of what is meant by the integrated and indivisible nature of the SDGs and our targets. Given the physical proximity and community characteristics of these comparator cities, e.g. Dublin, what? It is reasonable to infer the relevance of the findings to Scotland and other cities, or the three cities obviously. They need to ensure the accessibility of the public space for all becomes obvious in this context. Therefore, it is important that local governments and private sectors are prepared for the aging of the population and to adjust for it. So they can adjust for the aging of the population, but they can't adjust for the shrinking of the population. Now that needs to remain at a relatively high number, or a stable number. Can't shrink, but they're quite prepared for it to go the other way in terms of a bottleneck with too many old people. That's fine. We'll just adapt. Quite frankly, the thought of having all these brown and black people here from fucking Kenya and Africa and whatnot, hostile as well if the anti-white shit continues, looking after all our old people who have no ties of their own because they've all followed the pursuit of individualism, being looked after in care homes and whatnot by the likes of them. So I hope the fuck that they do put things in place to ensure that they can live in their own house sustainably away from them. I'm not saying that whites don't do cruel things in these care homes, but fuck me. Just horrible, even the thought of that. Equally, increased levels of walking and active travel have an important health dividend, as active populations are healthier than excessively sedentary ones. Many parts of the north, cities and local communities have developed innovative mechanisms related to housing, etc. to respond to these challenges. Many governments have programmes to increase the supply of housing available to low-income senior citizens and provide services that allow them to stay in their homes. That's great, fantastic stuff. I don't disagree that you should be doing that, but there's nothing put in place to, they can put policies like that into place to prioritise low-income senior citizens, but they can't do fucking the same sort of thing for newly married couples, for example. Or, have a baby and here you go. Here's a helping hand for a new house. No, can't be doing that, can we? Because that's just goes against the grain. Sustainable Development Goal 5 dictates that can never be the case, essentially. Jesus. The concentration of populations in many principal cities that benefit from international migration adds to a cosmopolitan character and diversity. This is again a very recent phenomenon here, because maybe in America you can make that argument to a certain extent, but even till the 1960s / early 70s, it was a white country, and now all of a sudden it's fucking every colour under the sun. So don't hammer that one. But nonetheless, however, a rapid influx of poor migrant workers into some major cities can produce negative reactions and associated social tensions. These issues are playing out now in the US and in the UK and are evident in the forces behind Brexit. Migration is then referenced, about fucking time really. In the last few years, international migration flows have risen to levels unprecedented since World War II, partly orchestrated, funded, etc. And at the end of the day, if the powers that be that pull the strings and whatnot didn't want this to be happening, they wouldn't allow it to happen. But at the end of the day, irrespective of who people in Britain vote for, it seems that you still end up with ridiculous levels of immigration coming into the country, and it's been going on for fucking years. To the point that, as I said earlier on, about 1 million odd, they say, came into the country to settle down last year. 1 million? What the fuck, like? It's a fucking disgrace, eh? Tiny island, and we're just letting in every Tom, Dick, Abdul, fucking Tamwar under the sun, like. And then you get the waffling SNP types, or just feminists doing, they're fleeing war. Oh, fuck off. Plenty of other countries you can go to, including countries that surround our own, that share the same culture and whatnot. You mean to tell me that each and every one of them is fleeing war and persecution? Nah, they're chancing it, and they've got people like you to thank for that. Both in the national and international migration. It says World War II there, Since World War II, and recent events have brought this sadly to the front of everyone's attention in Europe, with both internal and international migration substantially increasing through the countries of the UNECE due to globalisation that most people don't agree with. This is another concept that posed upon us. And you can't just brush off mass migration, changing countries, changing cities, changing towns, ethnically to the point where they're unrecognisable, and simply say, that's just globalisation. Well, if that's the case, we don't fucking want it. But again, this is sort of talked about as if it's commonly accepted. It's a consensus that we must all embrace. When is enough enough? It's the same sort of thing I think about with AI. They're playing with fire there. Well, maybe this globalisation shit really is detrimental, and if we continue down this road, it's going to fucking ruin all of our nations. They ever thought, no, can't do that. Can't do that at all. No, we have to continue, because that's the consensus. Have to keep on going forward, never back. Increased inequalities within and between countries, the discontinuation of population movement control in many eastern countries, and the lack thereof here and all, and the introduction of free movement in the EU, again done by design if you ask me, all done by design. Fucking. In the UK, Brexit was designed to mitigate this trend, preserve exacerbating the effects of falling birth rates and aging. Fuck off. Like, this has been an issue for some time. Even before Brexit, at least, as I've said before, they've known, and they would have known for a lot longer than that, but for at least 20 odd years they've known, because that population replacement paper from the UN came out in the year 2000, where they essentially brought up the concept, defined the concept, and then tried to say that, it's not happening, totally not happening. And then you had, I'm pretty sure Sargon made a video at the turn up, has anybody actually read the document? Because the document quite clearly says that it can't be done. You fucking mongo, it is happening right in front of your face, just because they said it's no. But anyway, I think he's changed his tune since then, but still, that irritated me, but I really am digressing here, and rambling even, fuck me. Another effect of increased migration is that many cities face the challenge of managing growing social and cultural diversity. A concept, a phenomenon that never works, in truth, but they'll have to tell you otherwise. Quite clearly not working, is it? But while increased diversity presents many positive sides, allegedly, fucking allegedly, but it may be seen to, challenge local identity and the social consensus underpinning the urban development model followed. Right, which I skipped. Given that the number of people living in cities will almost double to some 6.4 billion, by 2050, the world will in effect turn into a global city. You see, global citizenship, you're starting to see now, for anybody that may not necessarily know that much about global citizenship, you're starting to notice what's going on here. It's all in the rhetoric, the repetitive rhetoric that appears time and time again, albeit this is a wee bit different in terms of how it's worded, but it means the same thing as all the other fucking documents that I've covered in the past. A global cities, global citizenship, at all one, no borders, etc. So, the world will affect turn into a global city. Human mobility and migration play an important part in this, but are often misunderstood or misrepresented in the debate on urbanisation and city development. Local authorities are often an important official contact point of immigrants. While cities do not have a say on national or European migration regulations and general social and age-related policies, some cities have done better than others to successfully integrate migrants in reasonable numbers. I look at examples including Bilbao, Vienna, Marseille. Glasgow's Refugee Charity is a non-entity, but they are also not noteworthy example. If this issue seems remote or marginal to Scotland and this country's economic, social and environmental capital, consider the figures exhibited in the figures that compare the growth of the population over the period of 1970 to 2020, with Denmark, Finland and Norway then referenced as comparatives, and Ireland as well. These World Bank figures need careful scrutiny and more investigation. Figure 1 to 4 from the NRS, or National Records for Scotland, provide more clarity on geography of the small population growth in Scotland, showing that although areas in the east of Scotland are growing the fastest, this is the relative, and the reality is that Scotland's urban areas are growing, and with the exception of Orkney, rural areas are not. Scotland's ability to affect growth, its human capital is, however, influenced by the immigration policy of the UK government, which is a reserved matter. These issues are recognised widely in Scotland as influencing critical issues, including the growth potential of the economy. Fuck's sake, but again, no. It's all about the economy. It's all about what must be done, the status quo, the consensus, and nothing at all to address stuff. Where was the fucking paragraph there to say that, and if the trends continue, all this talk about concerns over immigration, if the trends continue, it will fundamentally mean the end of the ethnic Scottish people. No mention at all. It's just misrepresented. We'll just provide you with a couple of graphs to sweeten the deal, shall we? Fucking hell, man. Consider ending this video soon because it's over an hour already. But this bit here is, I think, of importance as well in its own right, really. I mean, I really should have just done this on a stream. And then I could have blasted through this. But whatever. In early 2020, the UN General Secretary described the effect of the COOF as a global health crisis that very conveniently came out of nowhere and, just happened to be the precursor to everything that we now see today that seems to be working in your favour, you fat Portuguese socialist. That's who they're referring to there, Antonio Guterres. But anyway, he was quoted as saying, unlike any in the 75-year history of the UN that attacks societies at their core, potentially provoking a global recession, or worse, is the credit crisis of 2019. In shared responsibility, global solidarity, responding to the socio-economic impacts of the COOF, the UN issued a plan to confront and address the challenge, stressing the socio-economic and multidimensional impacts created by the non-existent, in my opinion, COOF, their complexity, and recognise the profound and negative effect on sustainable development efforts, including the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement, and showed graphically the effect of the COOF on the SDGs, with the final section, shared responsibility, stressing the interaction with efforts to combat climate change and the need to use the opportunity created by the crisis to recover better and build more sustainable societies, as it says just below where my screen cuts off. Yeah, right. And in 2020 alone, in 2020, it was never-ending tropes from the S&P Sturgeon in particular. When we come out the other side of this, it'll be all about sustainable green recoveries. Lo and behold, fast forward, here we are. But yeah, fucking, it's just not telling me that all this has not been done by design, manufactured to lead us into the place where we now are headed towards more sustainable societies. As I said, there's quite a lot more to kind of go through, cover even, some relevant to what this kind of was about, some more relevant to other aspects that I have no interest really in delving too much into, but I might have to do a part 2 on this report alone, or perhaps a stream. I don't know, I might even just leave that for anybody that genuinely gets to the end of this video, and if they've got any ideas to, as you can see, some of what was being covered, I didn't get very far at all. I kind of ended up about here, Kuf, and continuity. I don't even think I got to fucking acceleration, but there's obviously, as I referred to earlier, other aspects, so maybe other points that you'd want to see kind of highlighted in particular. I could maybe go over in an additional video, but fundamentally that took too long. And I hate long videos, but it has to be done, I guess, sometimes, unless it's done in a stream format, to call it quits there for the time being on this one. So you'll enjoy my John Swinney. Don't ask, really, fucking don't ask what happened there with John Swinney, but anyway, peace.